ITV News has revealed the Prime Minister had a birthday party in June 2020 despite rules he'd implemented banning social gatherings indoors.
It's alleged that more than 30 officials were at the surprise get-together organised by Boris Johnson's wife, Carrie, where they had party food, ate cake and sang happy birthday. And joining us now is ITV News UK editor Paul Brand, who broke the story, and Hannah Brady, who was registering her dad Sean's death on the day Downing Street staff held a bring-your-own-booze garden party in May 2020.
Well, good morning to you both. Hannah, we've spoken about the fact that, you know, the garden party was a devastating moment for you. What do you now think, as we hear the latest allegation, that at a time when lockdown rules meant you could not have gathering indoors for social purposes, we now know that the Prime Minister had an event at Number 10 where members of staff gathered to give him a birthday cake and sing happy birthday?
I think it's just another chink in the chain that's going to wrap around Boris Johnson's neck and force him to resign. It's yet again one of countless parties that we hear of when the people of the UK, people like my family who were grieving, people who had lost jobs, restaurants and pubs were shut, hairdressers were still shut. We were almost a month away from being allowed to meet indoors. And Boris Johnson and his staff, this culture of exceptionalism at Number 10 that he created, thought it was appropriate to sing happy birthday at a time where you weren't allowed to sing at funerals.
Paul, you broke the story of the gathering at Number 10. What do we know about the details? What are Number 10 saying about it? And where do you think this goes? Because we know that Dominic Cummings has said there will be more to come out. Will there?
Well, morning, Susanna, quite possibly. And unless staff were washing their hands while they were singing happy birthday, it's very difficult to see how this particular gathering met the rules at the time. Downing Street are downplaying it overnight, doing their best to suggest that this was a small gathering of staff. In fact, the Transport Secretary's latest defence this morning was the Prime Minister didn't organise to be given cake. Some people came forward. But look, 30 people in a room, in there for 20 to 30 minutes, including the Prime Minister's wife, his interior designer, eating picnic food and cake. That is far more of a party than most people had during lockdown. And what's really important is that Downing Street are not denying that this happened and that the Prime Minister was there. So this is the hardest allegation, I think, to square with those original claims by the Prime Minister to Parliament back in December when he said, look, no rules were broken. And then later, I'm surprised, I'm shocked to hear staff even joking about rules being broken. Was he really surprised when he was at his own birthday bash? Was he misleading Parliament at that point, which Ed will know is normally a resigning matter for any minister?
Well, let's have a listen to what Boris Johnson said in Parliament. Oh, I'm terribly sorry. We haven't.
I've got it here. He said this was when the allegations broke, when the video broke of Allegra Stratton joking about the party, and he said, "Have we got it?"
I understand and share the anger up and down the country at seeing Number 10 staff seeming to make light of lockdown measures, and I can understand how infuriating it must be to think that the people who have been setting the rules have not been following the rules, Mr. Speaker, because I was also furious to see that clip.
He actually goes on to say, listen to this, I have been repeatedly assured since these allegations emerged that there was no party and that no COVID rules were broken. I mean, Paul, he said in December there was no party in Downing Street.
And now we know there is another one.
Which is why you're hearing...
I mean, how do we explain how that is not misleading Parliament?
And I think that's why you're hearing Downing Street overnight saying, look, was this really a party, just a bit of cake at the end of the day? Well, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon for starters, and we understand the Prime Minister's wife brought the cake into the room. And as I said earlier, the interior designer, Lulu Little, who was in Downing Street at that time, was also in the room, though she says she was just there to have a meeting with the Prime Minister about the interior decoration. But yeah, it's really difficult to square this with those original claims back in December, and not just this party, but the garden party on May the 20th, when Hannah was registering her father's death. Again, the Prime Minister was there. There was alcohol at that party. There were sausage rolls. There were trestle tables. You know, was that not a party? Did he really not clock that that was a party? So it's getting increasingly difficult, I think, for this defence to hold. And this week, we will get this internal investigation reported back from Sue Gray, the civil servant. And, you know, MPs are relatively quiet this morning, but I think they're just holding out for a couple of days until they see that report.
I mean, it's a cardinal rule in politics, Paul, that if you have a problem, then what you have to do is not say anything, not issue a statement until you can put out all the facts, put everything out there, and then explain. And then from that moment on, you never get tripped by further revelations. And they must have known that's what they should do back in December. And yet they seem to have gone out and said things and allowed themselves to then be tripped again and again and again by more allegations, more revelations, more parties. What was going on in December? Why did they decide not to follow the normal rules of politics? Was it that they didn't know the facts, or did they just know that if they put the full facts out there, it would be so devastating that the only thing to do was just try to bluff it through, hope it would go away, and hope we would never get to the story of the party that you reported on ITV last night? Because it's in striking contradiction. And, I mean, why would you say what Boris Johnson said if you'd been at the parties? How could you say, I've been repeatedly assured since these allegations emerged that there was no party, when you had been at party after party? Unless you just thought you could just get away with it and we'd all just forget about it.
I suppose, Ed, that they were hoping that this news wouldn't come out. And, you know, they'd seen the anger over Dominic Cummings breaking the rules, and they probably knew how dangerous this was for the Prime Minister, and they wanted to do as much as they could to limit that damage. Whether he was deliberately misleading Parliament, ultimately it's not for me to decide that, and Sue Gray is going to have to come up with her own conclusions in her report. But certainly it is very difficult, as I say, to see how you square all of this when the Prime Minister was so categorical in December that he did not know of any parties, of any rule breaking, and yet we know he was at some.
Hannah, it's particularly devastating, I think, for people like you who could not be with those they loved at the most painful moments in their loved ones' lives. And we have been inundated this morning with tweets and emails from people who just find this whole experience of the drip of the apparent rule breaking just so personally painful. Like you.
Yeah. I think even if you didn't lose a loved one during lockdown to COVID or to anything else, every time you hear the date of this new party, 19th of June, 18th of May, 20th of May, you're dragged back to what you were suffering at that time. If you'd lost your job, if you'd, like me, lost your dad, age 55, you know, he just celebrated his 55th birthday. Unlike Boris Johnson, he never would have seen his 56th birthday. He never would have got that cake brought in by a wife who clearly knew that this was way, way against the rules. The mood of the country at that time was solidarity, and that was what we were hearing from Downing Street. Stick together, stick to the rules, protect the NHS. And staff in Downing Street were mixing up to 30 people indoors and outdoors. It just seems that there was one rule for the rulers and one rule for the ruled. And at this point, Boris Johnson has become a public health hazard, because if we, God forbid, have to implement any future lockdowns, he's lost all credibility. He has no dignity. He's lost the respect of the British public. I would think he's lost the respect of his own MPs. And when Sue Gray's report comes out and inevitably discloses that he knew about parties, he's midless Parliament, if he doesn't resign, letters need to get into the 1922 committee. We need a leader who can get us out of this pandemic without the distractions of him breaking his own laws.
Hannah, thank you so much for being with us. Hannah Brady from Bereaved Families for Justice, and Paul Brand. Thank you very much indeed. We await, Paul, your next exclusive breaking news.